Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/maliciouscompliance. So sit back, relax and enjoy some satisfying stories. Change our deal last minute? Say goodbye to our improvements. So this story is about my mum and dad's malicious compliance to their former landlord. Due to job relocation and wanting to get an out-of-city environment, my mum and dad went searching for some place to live, and thus they found a home in another state. They talked to the landlord and signed a lease that was rent to own the home, which was perfect for growing their family. The deal was that they would pay the rent, and within 5 years they had the choice to purchase the home, and any money paid rent would go towards the purchase of the home. The original amount was for $90,000, and once they agreed on renting to own and signed the proper paperwork, they got to work fixing up their soon-to-be home to fit a family of 6. Light fixtures being changed, backyard being repaired, a brand new bathroom on the bottom floor, new piping, and so much more, all paid with their own money and all being done by my parents. My family were there for about 9 years, until the landlord came knocking saying she was ready to sell, but instead of being the $90,000 that was agreed upon and signed on, she upped it by $70,000. Obviously, my parents were beyond upset. They had a deal, they had papers signed, and what made it worse was my father was still in recovery from a very bad motor accident. They were already living paycheck to paycheck and were planning to pay the rest of the $90,000 after they got a loan, but now that was out of the question. They tried to talk about it to the landlord, but by no means she would budge. They didn't want to take her to court because that would have been more money lost, and it just wasn't worth it anymore. In the end, my family was given the option to either take the new deal or get all of our stuff out and go. And so they did just that. Everything that they put into the house was removed and replaced with the original items, and anything that couldn't be removed was billed to the landlord. In the end, the landlord gave my parents $3,000 plus the security deposit to move out, and the landlord was left with what they had, but maybe a bit better. The home ended up sitting vacant for 3 years after that, and got only $120,000 out of the house instead of the full $160,000 that she tried selling to my parents. Even though they did maliciously comply and they took everything out with them, I feel like they still lost out quite a bit because the landlord still profited like $30,000. Let you know every time a client walks in? No problem. So I work in a restaurant as FOH, which is front of house, the hostess to be precise, for a few years now. The restaurant hasn't ever had a really steady rhythm, meaning some lunches/dinners can be either quiet or very hectic. Luckily, with the way helpers are trained there, you become a personified Swiss Army knife, where I'm not only stuck at the entrance greeting people, but cleaning tables, running the food, making drinks, yada yada yada. You get the gist. No barback? That's alright. No busboy? I got it. This avoids us getting completely screwed over if we're short-staffed and large groups of clients show up. During these rushes, the kitchen is obviously getting screwed too. No one is having a good time, but we're all in this together. At the end of one of these rushes, I decide to take a breather at the pass, the space where we get the plate separate from the rest of the restaurant. This one cook in particular, let's name him Tim, loves to complain about everything and everyone, and it's never discreet, which I got a taste of that shift. He goes on about the terrible rush and then begins to complain about the FOH doing a bad job and nobody letting him know every time clients come in. We find this only necessary if groups of 5+ show up, so that the kitchen can be more prepared in the meantime, or else it would be an incessant disruption at the pass during busy lunches. Huh? A light bulb goes off in my head. I give him a big smile and apologize. That night I go home and couldn't be more excited for tomorrow. The next day strolls by. I clock in and lo and behold, another very busy lunch. We have multiple tables of 2s, 3s, 4s, a few groups of 5+s, and many people coming in alone. So of course, being the good team player that I am, I report back to Tim every single time, making sure not to trouble the other cooks. There's a guy alone at the bar. There's 2 ladies at the booth. There's another man by himself by the window. Tim starts by snobbishly thanking me, so I decide to kick it up a notch and start describing them. There's a couple that just walked in with their 2 kids. They're blonde if you were wondering. There's this other tall guy wearing glasses and a business suit going to table 21. After just 15 minutes, he begs me to stop, understanding what I'm doing, and takes back what he said yesterday. Front of house or back of house, everyone's trying their best. Oh, well, at least it only took him 15 minutes and he still backtracked on his statement, so good for him. Hold my check? Okay, let's cash it instead. And then I'll deposit the cash. So this was a few years ago. My bad bank at the time had a policy about check deposits over a certain amount, maybe $500. They held them for 24 hours. Well, I got paid on Friday by check. It was a small employer that didn't offer direct deposit. So every 2 weeks I went to the bank after work. The tellers were still working, but apparently the processing day was over. So my 24 hours didn't start until Monday, and my money would finally be available Tuesday sometime. This was super frustrating, especially when rent was due on Saturday or Sunday. But the bank's policy allowed them to cash any check for customers as long as they had at least as much in their total accounts, which I did in savings. So this became my routine. Get paid, go to the bank, have them cash out my check down to the penny, and then immediately deposit the cash, except for maybe $40. As you can imagine, this took the teller noticeably longer than simply depositing my check. But hey, policy is policy, right? I've always thought checks were a bit stupid and like long-winded. I'm so glad I never have to work with them. A nearly 200-person malicious compliance. This took place around 2012-ish. The pride of the high school was always the marching band. For that reason, the band was a quarter of the nearly 800 students at the school. We had about 185 students the year this compliance happened. So every year, the band went on a trip out of state to compete in the Bands of America competition. It was the trip everyone looked forward to. We did a ton of fun things, missed a week of school, and the last day there, we competed in a professional stadium. The band director would call and schedule things for us so we don't randomly show up to a mall or a McDonald's or something and him throw 200 kids at them. He had called ahead to one mall to work out eating at the food court, as that was the easiest while we were traveling there. He usually planned in these trips when it was time for the bus drivers to rest for a couple hours, and we were allowed to get food and shop at the mall. So we get to this point in our trip where we are given the speech of behave yourselves and reminded of the consequences if we don't. We go inside and start shopping and eating. Then everyone starts getting stopped by mall security. Then over the intercom system, it is announced for city high school students to come to the front area of the mall. They said that they had a rule that didn't allow kids to be at the mall past 6, not even with adults. Not even a quarter of us had eaten. No one had caused problems, but they wanted us out. My band director gets a hold of the person he had planned it with, and they agree if we go in 5 kids to every adult, we can continue as planned. The cheeky grin on the security guard's face as he said, "There are nearly 200 students here. You would need 40 adults. You only have 7, is forever burned into my head as it is the drop of his face as a senior raised his hand and said, I am 18, I count as an adult. And then all of us 18 plus age students stood up and started pulling IDs out. Smug security guard had to check every ID and give out wristbands to the adults. We had enough 18-year-olds that we technically didn't need the chaperones that came. So they all sat around and watched as us 18-year-olds handed our 5 kids and no harm came of them all. The security guards were very grumpy that we had the adults needed. We got our food, I bought suspenders and a panda hat from Hot Topic, like I did every band trip, and we placed fairly decent that year. I bet that wasn't a rule, like the mall called beforehand and said 200 kids and they obviously agreed, yeah, we can do that. And then as soon as they saw 200 kids, they like freaked out and was like, oh, let's make a quick rule real quick, and then yeah. Did you just cut in line? I work at a coffee shop. I won't say which, but it's exactly the one someone would think of immediately when they hear coffee shop, at least here in the US. Anyways, I'm manning the register. The second register person is fixing up something else behind me, and the drink maker co-worker is basically making drinks, obviously. So there are 3 of us. There's a line of about 4 to 6 people from what I notice in my periphery the moment before the scene begins. Bit of context, despite possibly coming off like I'm stereotyping. I'm in Hawaii and work in a hotel. Yes, the coffee shop is inside a hotel, so 99% of my customers are tourists / off-islanders. This means I get people from nations all over, or within the Pacific Rim, including East Asia, Australia, North America, etc. Now, certain countries have certain cultures, which means they are fundamentally different to the US in the most denotative way I can describe, and despite coming to the US and knowing that we are culturally different than their country, they still act like their country's different standards are okay or unproblematic. On to the story. I'm helping a lady of a certain nationality, which is evident by her heavy accent. Working in this shop for 4 years, working in Waikiki for 8 years, and living in Hawaii for almost 30, it's pretty innate to immediately know someone's ethnicity / nationality from their accent alone. I've barely taken any notice to who's next in line, as I'm focusing primarily on the customer ahead of me. I finish her order, which ends up taking my gaze away from front-face visuals, and possibly notice some new customers immediately behind her that might have walked in from the wrong way. I take note of this as cutting in line is just a plausible and realistic thing that happens in life, and more so happens with people of their nationality, by my own personal small but 8-year-long sample size. These 2 new ladies are of the same nationality as the customer I am currently finishing up. I point the lady towards the pickup area, as people of her age don't know how this works and she shuffles along. As the 2 ladies approach the register, before I even had a chance to call them forward, if I intended to, I put my hand up and say something along the line of, "Did you 2 just walk in from this way?" Gesturing the opposite direction of the line. You have to wait in line and let these other people go first. I gesture visually, showing how the line of people and the queue flow. I make eye contact with the next 2 customers, Americans, based on their clothes and posture. Americans usually lean on one leg. EU typically distribute balance on 2 legs when standing. They look a little ticked and are looking at the ladies. Definite evidence. I turn back towards the ladies. The one in front looks a little flustered now, and the one behind starts speaking. "We with her." She points out the previous customer waiting for her drink, and isn't even looking this way, as if she has zero actual relation to these ladies or the situation. Noting that the behind lady didn't actually answer the question, textbook deflection, I looked again at the Americans with my eyebrows slightly raised, as if asking for their input. but they were pretty fixed on staring daggers at these women now. I looked back towards the ladies. The front one is even more thrown, not even making eye contact anymore. And the back lady tries to fix it by saying, "I not here, my friend was in the line though," and walks away, leaving her guilt-ridden friend to take the brunt of anything else I do. I turn to my coworker and tap her on the shoulder as she wasn't aware of the situation, and go, "Hey, can you ring the next few customers up real fast?" Then in a lowered voice, "There's an incident." I continued, implying I would tell her later so I could cause less of a scene and enact more of an immediate fix to the situation. I'm not super confrontational until push comes to shove, and this wasn't one of those moments, so I chose the compliance over outright revenge or public freakouting. I started taking the lady's order. She seemed a bit guilty, and I'll admit this is what made me choose to be less vengeful, but I still lean more towards the "if you don't speak up, you're part of the problem." So I chose to ring her up very slowly, asking her to repeat a few things she didn't say loud enough, forgetting something once or twice, and ultimately doing everything physical in a slower manner, while my coworker rung up the line quickly. Eventually, it timed out nicely that by the time I finished her whole order, the entire line was rung up and their drink orders were in queue. So I simply placed her 2 cups down at the end of the queue, as that's just when I happened to have finished her order, and put a nice smiley face on instead of asking her name, which I can neither confirm nor deny means decaf this drink. As the compliance was set in motion, out of my hands now, I restocked a bit, keeping an eye on the 2 ladies. The guilty one was off to the side looking away, as the brash one stood front and center at the handoff point, expecting the next drink to be hers. Then the next drink, then the next drink, as the actual drink owners had to maneuver their arms around her to grab their drinks. The Americans actually asked her to step aside, which made them smile and her frown more. Eventually, they got their whole order, after every other customer had been served and left, and the brash woman looked like she was fuming from impatience, and as they walked out, they didn't even glance at their friend, the first customer sitting with her family, still showing no sign of knowing these 2 other ladies. Did they mess with the decaf order? Because I've heard a lot of people say that that's like a no-go, so other than that it was good, but maybe just don't mess with people's actual orders, just in case, you know? Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like, and if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.